Good afternoon. Welcome to the Garfunkel Wild and HFMA presentation on restrictions on relationships with pharmaceutical manufacturers. My name is Andrew Bluestein. I am the Vice Chairman of Garfunkel Wild, and I am joined this afternoon by Lourdes Martinez, a Partner Director, and Julia Belton, an Associate in our office. We want to thank HFMA for giving us this opportunity, given the number of people who registered and the wide breadth of providers and industry personnel who are represented. This is obviously a topic that resides well with people. Now, you should be seeing our slides on your screen, and we are going to try to remember to move forward with them. And what we're going to do is Lourdes is going to start, then Julia is going to take over, and we're going to leave about 10 to 15 minutes, hopefully, for questions. I can guarantee you we will not get to all of your questions, but feel free to put them in as we're talking. At the end of our slides is everyone's contact information. If you put in a question, I promise we will get back to you. May not be today, but we will get back to you, and you can reach out to any of the people who are speaking directly. And with that, let's start to move. So first of all, just a 10-second commercial. Garfunkel, Wild, and Travis there we go. I dated myself. Garfunkel Wild is a law firm that caters to the healthcare industry. We are in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We have offices there, but we spread out all over the country. And we are here for any type of regulatory compliance, corporate, or any other issue that might come up in your provider world. We're here for you. Okay, that takes us to slide 4, which is the agenda. So what are we really talking about here? The relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and providers is one that's always fraught with tensions and concerns, and we are going to be exploring those through the lens of these new regulations that have come in effect. They cover, and we'll mention this, they cover a wide range of providers. They have become effective. So this is something that if you're on here, you should already know, but don't worry, we're going to explain them to you. And we're going to try to zero in on practical, what is prohibited and what is permitted and what record reporting requirements you need. Now, before I turn it over to Lourdes, I wanted to introduce the bio of both Lourdes now and as well as Julia. Lourdes is co-chair of our firm's compliance and white-collar defense and is a member of our HIPAA compliance and healthcare practice group. She represents providers in a wide range of compliance and regulatory defense issues. And before joining us, she was an assistant district attorney in Queens County District Attorney's Office, and she is a leading expert on compliance. That's why her involvement in these regulations and how you'll all need to comply is crucial. Julia comes out of actually a background in the pharmaceutical industry, so that's why her expertise is also not just limited to the law, but she also brings that to it. So between the both of them, I think you will be well prepared to tackle these new regulations and protect yourself. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Lourdes, and you should be on slide that reads overview.
Good afternoon, everybody. So let's get to the nitty-gritty of the regulations. Why did New Jersey feel the need to implement and to do these regulations. So the goal is really twofold. If you read the commentary to the new regulations, the Attorney General noted that he believes that the vast majority of prescribers are guided by the best interest of their patients. However, these regulations, according to the state, are necessary in order to minimize the potential for prescriber conflict of interest and to strengthen the enforcement efforts by the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General. There are exceptions, and I just wanted to put these up front because I don't want everybody out there to think that this applies to clinical trials or to research activities. Later on, there is a slide as to what research activities are, but I think it's a good idea to read you the definition now so that you can have this in the back of your mind as we're going through what is and what is not permissible according to these new regulations. So here we go, and don't worry about writing it down because it's later on in slide 26. Research is any study assessing the safety or efficacy of prescribed products administered alone or in combination with other prescribed products or other therapies, or assessing the relative safety or efficacy of prescribed products in comparison with other prescribed products or other therapies, or any systematic investigation, including scientific advising on the development, testing, and evaluation that is designed to develop or contribute to general knowledge, or reasonably can be considered to be of significant interest or value to the scientist or prescriber working in the particular field. It applies to both pre- and post-market activities. So I wanted to put that up front. So if you're involved in research activity or clinical trials, you're not panicking right now about these new regulations. This next slide was just a little interesting survey that was quite old. It was from 2001, but it is an extensive study of how physicians are affected by gifts from the pharma industry. The interesting part is that 61% indicated that they would not be influenced by gifts or entertainment or the such from the pharma industry. But only 16% of the physicians thought that other physicians would not be influenced by gifts. So this next one is just, the name of the study was called The Principles and Pens. And this next one is just a graph as to the influence that the physicians thought that other physicians would have based on this. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of these regulations, you all know that there are other laws, there are other guidance that's out there that pretty much tries to regulate or is aimed at the relationships between physicians and the pharma industry. So what do we have? We have the federal anti-kickback statute, which basically says that a provider cannot give or receive anything of value in exchange for a referral of business that will be paid for by Medicare, Medicaid, or any other federally funded program. That is a criminal statute, and liability is ascribed to both sides of the arrangement, the illegal arrangement. We have the Physician Payment Sunshine Act, the Open Payment Act, which requires drug and medical device companies to track payments to physicians and teaching hospitals. You'll see later on in the presentation that while the Open Payments Act requires the manufacturer and medical device companies to track the payment, it's different in New Jersey. The physicians are going to have to, or the prescribers are going to have to track. And we have the Pharma Code. Now, what's different between the Pharma Code and the New Jersey rules? The Pharma Code is guidelines. They've been around for a while, and they've always been recommended. However, it's not the law. So it's not something that you're going to be prosecuted for or brought a case for if you don't follow those guidelines. These are just some interesting numbers. In 2016, the 2017 numbers aren't available yet, but in 2016, the open payments, the Sunshine Act reported almost $8.2 billion paid to providers, with 11.9, let's call it 12 million published records. And this is just a breakdown of who got the money. So if you look, there's 631,000 physicians that got $2 billion, 1,146 teaching hospitals that got $723 million, and so forth. New Jersey alone, if you look up in the Open Payments Act, providers in New Jersey got $50,496,494. I left out the cents. Okay. So in promulgating these regulations, New Jersey is pretty much not on their own. Other states have similar restrictions or similar laws, such as California, Oregon, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Vermont, Montana. Okay, so who do the regulations apply to? The regulations apply to pharmaceutical manufacturers and pharmaceutical manufacturers' agents, as well as New Jersey healthcare providers. And when we're talking about New Jersey healthcare providers, specifically, we're talking about physicians, podiatrists, physician's assistants, advanced practice nurses, dentists, or optometrists. You didn't have to write that down. It's coming up in a future slide. So what is a pharmaceutical manufacturer? A pharmaceutical manufacturer is any entity engaged in the production, preparation, propagation, compounding, conversion, or processing of prescription drugs and biologicals, okay? Or an entity that is directly engaged in the packaging, repackaging, labeling, relabeling, or distribution of prescription drugs. It does not include a healthcare facility that's licensed by the Department of Health or a pharmacy holding a permit by the Board of Pharmacy. So these are your pharmaceutical manufacturers. It applies to all manufacturers, but it also applies to pharmaceutical manufacturers' agents. Who are the agents? An agent is a person who, while employed by or under contract with the pharmaceutical manufacturer, engages in detailing, promotional activities, or other marketing of prescription drugs or biologicals to any prescriber that's authorized to prescribe, okay? It does not apply, does not include a prescriber or pharmacist when acting within the ordinary scope of the practice for which he or she is licensed, okay? So if you are a physician seeing a patient, you will still be considered a prescriber, but you're not the manufacturer's agent while you are seeing your patient. Okay, so this is just a list of who it applies to. Again, physicians, podiatrists, physician assistants, advanced practice nurses, dentists, and optometrists. Okay, so these regulations became effective on January 16th of 2018, okay? And they do not apply to contracts that were entered into on or before, the day before they became effective, January 15th of 2018. So they are applicable this year. They're applicable as we sit here and discuss them, which is why it's so important that we know what we have to do. Okay. So what can we not do? What is prohibited? I'm going to talk about what's prohibited, and Julia is then going to take over and let you know what is permitted. So let's talk about the general rule. Generally, a prescriber cannot accept directly or indirectly from any pharmaceutical manufacturer or manufacturer's agent any financial benefit in kind, including but not limited to gifts, payments, stock options, grants, scholarships, subsidies, and charitable contributions. That is not an exhaustive list. There are exceptions to this, so let's not panic until we hear the exceptions, but that is the general rule. Okay. A prescriber cannot accept directly or indirectly any entertainment or recreational items. No tickets to the Yankee games or, theater tickets, no vacations, no leisure trips, nothing like that. And cannot accept any item of value that does not advance disease or treatment education. So, pens, notepads, clipboards, mugs, or other items with the company product logo, we are not supposed to accept. This is actually not new. This is also in the Pharma Code. It's been in the Pharma Code for well over 10 years. But again, the Pharma Code or guidelines, and these are laws. Okay. A prescriber also, continuing with what we cannot accept. We cannot accept payments in cash or cash equivalent, which means gift certificates, or any items of value intended for the personal benefit of the prescriber. What does that mean? Floral arrangements, sporting equipment, artwork, items like electronic devices that you can use for your practice, but also has a value in a non-professional setting. We cannot accept those. Okay. A non-faculty prescriber. Let's stop there for a second and talk about what a non-faculty prescriber means. Non-faculty means a person who is not a speaker for the pharmaceutical company or manufacturer, or is not providing actual or substantive services for the manufacturer in the form of an academic program or a consultant for either an education event or for a promotional activity. We're going to talk about what is an education event and what is a promotional activity. But let's go back for a second and talk about the non-faculty provider. So if you're not providing services or speaking for the pharmaceutical company, you may not accept any payment or subsidy to support the attendance at or get any monies or any type of perk for the time that you spend at either an education event or a promotional activity. This includes the cost of travel, the cost of lodging, or other personal expenses that are associated with attendance at either the educational event or the promotional activity. Okay, what is an educational event? It is a third-party scientific or educational conference, a professional meeting, an FDA-required education or training held in a venue that is appropriate and conducive to informational communication. Okay, so, the boondoggles of the past of, let's go and listen for 20 minutes to some spiel and then go play golf for 3 days, that would not be considered an educational event. Maybe the 20 minutes, but not the 3 days after. So for an educational event, the gathering has to be primarily dedicated in both time and effort to promoting objective scientific, and educational activities and discourse. The main purpose of an educational event has to be to bring people together, to further educate them, to increase their knowledge on whatever the topic is that is being presented. So that's an educational event. It must be for the education of the prescriber. A promotional activity, which is obviously different than an educational event, is an unaccredited activity, meeting, program that's organized or sponsored by the pharmaceutical manufacturer or the agent, and that is directed at prescribers to promote the prescription, recommendation, consumption of, purchase of, whatever it is that's being sold. It does not include, a promotional activity does not include an education event or services provided in connection with research activity. Okay, so that's what a promotional activity is. I'm going to skip slide 26 because I already spoke about this in the beginning. This is really the definition of research. We wanted you to have it there so you don't have to go back and look for it, but I did want to bring it up in the beginning so that you didn't have to wonder. Okay, so whatever applies to the prescriber, so this general forbiddance of gifts, entertainment, recreation that we've just spoken about for the past 10 or so slides is also a restriction, again, on the prescriber's immediate family members. So let me just tell you who an immediate family member is. An immediate family member is a spouse, civil union partner, or domestic partner. A child. When residing in the same household of the individual, that individual or his or her spouse's civil union partner or domestic partner's parent. A brother or sister, an aunt or uncle, a niece or nephew, a grandparent, grandchild, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, step-parent, stepchild, stepbrother, stepsister, half-brother, half-sister, whether their relative is related to the individual or the individual spouse, civil union partner, or domestic partner by blood, marriage, or adoption. So pretty much anybody in your family, there's a restriction. Okay. The restriction obviously does not apply, the prohibition doesn't apply to an immediate family member who's employed by the manufacturer, the pharmaceutical manufacturer, and receives as part of the usual and customary employment relationship any type of compensation, financial benefit, or other item of value. And finally, the prescriber shall not accept meals from any pharmaceutical manufacturer or manufacturer's agent unless there is a permissible exception. Now, there are permissible exceptions. I'm going to turn this over now to Julia, who's going to continue telling you, hopefully, what you can do.
Hello. So the regulations do carve out permissible gifts and payments that are expressly permitted under the regs. So for example, even though we just went through that meals are something that are prohibited, the regulation carved out an exemption to permit meals in certain circumstances. There's two circumstances in which a prescriber may accept a meal. A prescriber can accept a meal at an education event, but that education event must facilitate, the meal must facilitate that event and maximize prescriber learning. A prescriber may also accept a meal at a promotional activity. This must be a non-faculty member of the meeting who doesn't serve as a speaker or provide actual or substantive services, and in that circumstance, they may accept a meal. However, the Attorney General has defined a modest meal in this circumstance to mean any food or refreshment where the fair market value does not exceed $15 for each prescriber. Originally, the Attorney General had drafted regulations that only allowed a prescriber to accept 4 modest meals per calendar year, but upon adoption, the Attorney General removed the requirement for 4 meals a year. So the prescriber may accept however many meals they want per year, but that meal cannot exceed $15. One of the other items that a prescriber may accept that's expressly permitted in the regulations are items that are designed primarily for educational purposes for patients, or that the prescriber and those items have minimal or no value to the prescriber outside of his or her professional responsibilities. So while the regulations that Lourdes had just described prohibit a prescriber accepting any items of value, such as electronic devices, it is permitted in a certain circumstance where that material is directly related to patient care or prescriber education. For example, a prescriber may accept an item designed for educational purposes. This item may not have any value to the prescriber outside of his profession. So items that may have an independent value to the prescriber outside of his professional responsibilities may be accepted if they remain in the common area of the prescriber's office. So an example in the regulation would be electronic devices, but that has to remain in the waiting room or the common area, and that prescriber isn't taking it home. And that's the distinction between what would be an acceptance of an item of value that's permissible under the regulations and prohibited. Another example that a prescriber may accept under the regulations are a prescriber may accept a pharmaceutical manufacturer's subsidized registration fee at an education event. However, that registration fee must be available to all of the event participants. It cannot just be the one prescriber gets this reduced subsidized fee. A prescriber may also accept compensation that's based on fair market value for providing bona fide services as a speaker or faculty organizer, an academic program consultant for an education event. The prescriber that's serving in this capacity may also accept reasonable payment for travel, lodging, and other personal expenses associated with these services. The prescriber may also be granted continuing education credit for participating in such activities. And what we mean by bona fide services is actually defined in the regulations as services provided by a prescriber pursuant to an arrangement formalized in a written agreement. That written agreement also has requirements that are on the next 2 slides that I'll go through. But that written agreement would be for services that are an example of presentations as speakers at promotional activities and educational events, or permissible bona fide service would be participating on an advisory board or entering into a consulting arrangement. Again, as Lourdes described in the beginning, bona fide services do not include services provided by a prescriber in connection with research activities. The Attorney General did carve out research and clinical trials from the compensation section of these regulations. On this slide, it goes through the requirements for the written agreement for the bona fide services. The written agreement has to be in writing, signed, and must identify the services that the prescriber is going to be providing, the dollar value of the consideration to be received by the prescriber. Again, it has to be fair market value. The written agreement must also identify that the meetings held in association with the bona fide services occur in venues and under circumstances that are conducive to the services provided, and that the activities related to the services are the primary focus of the meeting. In the notice and comment, the Attorney General had explained that venues that are appropriate for where education can be, for where events can be held, are a healthcare facility or an academic institution. The written agreement for bona fide services must also identify the legitimate need for services in advance, the connection between the competence, knowledge, and expertise of the prescriber and the purpose of the arrangement. The written agreement also has to identify how participation of the prescriber is reasonably related to achieving the identified purpose, and the manner by which the prescriber will maintain records concerning the arrangement and the services provided by the prescriber. The last bullet point is important, and it's relating to the annual cap on compensation that I'll discuss in a few minutes. But the agreement must identify how the prescriber is tracking the amount of compensation that they are receiving from the manufacturer. Lastly, the written agreement must include an attestation that the prescriber's decision to render the services is not unduly influenced by a pharmaceutical manufacturer's agent. So we just went through the requirements for everything that a prescriber and a pharmaceutical manufacturer or the agent would need to have in their written agreement. That's fair market value. But the point of that is because the regulations have placed an annual cap of $10,000 on the compensation that prescribers may receive in any calendar year from any manufacturer, not just one pharmaceutical manufacturer, but all pharmaceutical manufacturers. So this bona fide services cap limits the amount that the prescriber may accept to not more than $10,000 in the aggregate from all pharmaceutical manufacturers for the bona fide services of presentation of speakers at promotional activities, participating on an advisory board, and consulting arrangements. Also, the bona fide services cap applies to any compensation that a provider may receive from a presentation, even if that presentation was presented out of state. For example, if you are a New Jersey licensed physician and you hold a New Jersey license, but you are speaking at a pharmaceutical manufacturer's presentation in Pennsylvania, that compensation that you receive for that presentation in Pennsylvania is still applicable to the $10,000 cap, and that is because you are a New Jersey license holder. There are carve-outs to the bona fide services cap of $10,000 a year, and that would be payments for speaking at education events. So while the Attorney General carved out education events from the $10,000 cap, education events are still under the purview of the AG's office, and the payments must be in fair market value and must be set forth in the written agreement using all of the requirements for the bona fide services agreement that we just went through. Payments for research activities, and research being the definition that Lourdes had used earlier, are not subject to the $10,000 cap. And then payments that physicians or prescribers may receive for royalties and licensing fees are also not subject to the $10,000 annual cap. A prescriber may accept compensation based on fair market value for participating in an ad board or under a consulting agreement. The compensation that the prescriber receives for participating in either must be consistent with the requirements for the bona fide services written arrangement that I just went through. This is subject to the $10,000 a year cap, and the prescriber serving in its capacity may also accept reasonable payment for travel, lodging, and other personal expenses associated with their bona fide services. A prescriber may also accept reasonable payment for travel, lodging, and other personal expenses in connection with research activities. But remember, research activities is exempt from the $10,000 cap. A prescriber may accept compensation for travel, lodging, and other personal expenses associated with employment recruitment. So if the pharmaceutical manufacturer wants to pay for a potential job candidate's travel or lodging, that is permissible under the regulations. The Attorney General's office did not intend to prohibit certain payments for royalties and licensing fees, and acknowledge that such payments are clearly distinct from promotional activities. So therefore, royalties and licensing fees that are paid in return for contractual rights to use or purchase a patented or otherwise legally recognized discovery for which the prescriber holds an ownership right is permissible. A prescriber may also accept sample medications that are intended to be used exclusively for the benefit of the prescriber's patients, provided that the prescriber does not charge patients for the samples and that all dispensing standards set forth in the provider's licensing board rules are satisfied. And then our last section is the reporting, record keeping, and disclosure requirements. The new regulations do not impose any reporting requirement on pharmaceutical manufacturers or on prescribers. However, it is important to note that the prescriber is responsible for tracking compensation received from any bona fide services provided. This is one of the elements in the required written agreement. The agreement must identify the manner by which the prescriber will maintain records concerning the arrangement and the services provided by the prescriber. There is a disclosure requirement, so a prescriber serving as a speaker at an education event or for a promotional activity must directly disclose to attendees, either orally or in writing, at the beginning of the presentation that the prescriber has accepted payment for bona fide services from the sponsoring pharmaceutical manufacturer within the preceding 5 years. Lastly, a prescriber who is an employee of a pharmaceutical manufacturer who also provides patient care must disclose to patients, either orally or in writing, that they are employed by the pharmaceutical manufacturer.
Okay, so just a few more, we're at the end of our formal presentation, but just a few more notes that I wanted to, a few more thoughts before we start taking the questions and answers. So, what's the takeaway here, okay? If you're a prescriber and you have a relationship with a pharmaceutical company, you need to go back and make sure that your relationship either complies with these new regulations or we need to make them comply with the new regulations. On a day-to-day, what do I see in the last 20 years that I'm in healthcare? I'll go to a client and I'll see the pharmaceutical reps coming in with, lunch for everybody on a daily basis. Well, is that okay? Maybe if they're actually sitting down and meeting with the doctors, but can you just kind of drop off lunch, say hello, remember me, and leave? Not really. Everybody comes with the mugs, the pens, the notepads, which, most providers have accepted despite the pharma code. Is that going to be okay going forward? No. Why risk it? That's a red flag. Let's just, not take it and move on. So those are just a few of the things that we need to focus on. But now let's take a look. You can type in your questions. Let's take a look and see what questions you have. So give us a second while we pull these up.
Okay, while we're waiting, this is Andrew Bluesing. Let me ask both Julia and Lourdes a question. So, despite the regulations, what do you do if you find out a department in your hospital is just having a drug rep that's showing up with a bunch of lunches for everyone, and we're blowing right through all of the preset dollar amounts? So what do you do?
So if you're just showing up with lunches for everyone and you don't have a meeting with a Dr. Bluestein or whomever to tell them how great your Lipitor is, you have to say thank you, but no thank you, and you can no longer do this. You can no longer just show up every day with a lunch for the department. So unfortunately, it's the law. That's the way it has to be.
Okay, so
now.
let me stay with Lourdes with you for a second. Given all of the compliance work you're doing in hospitals, Dr. Bluestein is going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. We've been doing this for 10 years. If the pharmaceutical companies are making a mistake, that's on them. What can happen to me as a doctor?
Okay, so there are enforcement to this Attorney General's rules. So, and the enforcement varies from, Julie, Yeah, for the licensing board. So you can be brought up in front of the Bureau for the BME if you are not complying with these laws. So your license is in jeopardy. That's the bottom line. So you're not going to do it.
Or civil fine. So you can have a disciplinary action on your license, or the licensing board can decide to fine you.
So basically, the response to Dr. Lucian would be, forgetting about our code of conduct and all the things we have in a hospital, if you go and do this, you're putting your license and your family's revenue at risk, right?
Your livelihood is on the line. Correct.
Okay. And so, Julia, you having kind of plowed through all of the commentary, did you get a sense from there that the state of New Jersey is serious about this and there's passion behind it, which might lead to enforcement?
Yes, because the Attorney General promulgated draft regulations back in October. They received a significant amount of pushback from the industry. They went through hundreds of public comments. They published 42 pages of public comment, and upon adoption, had amended some of the rules to create certain carve-outs. So that's where you see the carve-out for education event. It no longer has to be an accredited event. It could be an unaccredited workshop, but it still must meet the requirements. The Attorney General also said that, while they are technically not the enforcer, it's the licensing board, but that licensing board can use their general powers to have a disciplinary action against your license or use their civil penalties.
Okay.
Right.
So I guess we don't want to be the first provider out there testing these regs. Okay, so
we go to the first
yeah,
one because it's already gone down.
The questions are flying in, so just give us a second to deal with this.
Okay, so the first question was, is the $15 limit per provider only or per staff? It is a $15 limit per person.
Per prescriber.
Per prescriber, right. So, it says per provider, yes. So yes, it is per the prescriber.
And I guess you can really get a little nutty here. Does that include delivery tips and things like that? Your point is, let's stay as far away from it as we can.
Exactly. And $15 is an extremely low amount of money. I don't even think you could get McDonald's for $15 per person anymore. So
a dollar meal, maybe.
Maybe the dollar meals.
Right.
All right.
So the Attorney General went through a lot of public comment, and they got a lot of pushback for the $15 meal cap. They got specific examples for specific hotels in West Orange and Newark, stating that you cannot even have the continental breakfast there for $15. And the Attorney General, time and time again, refused to change the $15 cap.
So to Andrew's point, stay away from it. It's not worth the dollar meal or the continental breakfast.
Right. So it looks like the state of New Jersey really thought these through. So Julia, coming out of your background in the pharmaceutical world, do you think this is something that's going to be it's going to lead to change in practice? What would be your guess on that?
Yes, but the problem is the pharmaceutical manufacturers, I don't know what incentive a pharmaceutical manufacturer would have to stop providing lunches or to stop having sales reps detail, because the problem falls on the license holder. So it's going to be the responsibility of the license holder, your physician practices, and your hospitals to make sure that their doctors and prescribers truly understand the requirements, because the pharmaceutical manufacturers have no incentive to stop their behavior.
Interesting. Okay, so I guess in 2018 probably will be a year of getting everything together, and I would expect to see enforcement in 2019. Okay, so let me ask Lourdes the next question.
Right.
Does the $15 meal apply towards the physician's $10,000 cap?
No, it's two separate things. The $15 cap does not apply. The $10,000 cap is for the services that the prescriber is providing for the manufacturer, the pharmaceutical company.
It's the bona fide services.
Right.
So, there has to be an agreement in fair market value for bona fide services that prescriber is providing. The $15 meal cap is separate.
Okay. The next question I think is looking back, but we need to be looking forward. It said, what is the dollar value in fines collected by the New Jersey Attorney General for non-compliance last year?
These are brand new.
Right. So this would be looking forward.
These are effective January 16th of this year, so 2 months ago, looking forward.
And I don't know if
These aren't retro.
And I don't know if that's going to be public information. I don't know how much is public, because you can work with the Board of Medical Examiners, right, with your consent decree, and you can, request that it's private. I don't know if it will be public, so I don't know if that data
will be
is
available. Okay, so I have a question for Lourdes. Lourdes, given your former prosecutorial background and what you're seeing out there, if you're a prosecutor and you're going to want to make a big splash, do you pick a large system? Do you pick a small provider? Does that enter into your thinking?
It does enter into my thinking, because I'm going to look to see who's got the deeper pockets. But what I would try to do is look at these regulations. I would see which prescriber is violating these regulations and to what extent. And then I would dig further to see, is there a kickback here? Do I have an anti-kickback case that would garner much huger settlements and much huger fines than the licensure that this particular rule or regulation?
So looking at some of the people who have signed up today, I'm a compliance, let's say, now it's not Dr. Bluestein, it's Compliance Officer Bluestein. I'm sitting there and I'm hearing this and I go, wow, like, what do I do, considering I should have already been in compliance? And maybe, of course, not any of our clients, but maybe there's somebody out there who has not yet really dealt with this, right? What's the first thing? What's the second thing I should be doing?
If I'm a doctor and or I'm a compliance officer and I have doctors, I have prescribers that have relationships with pharmaceutical manufacturers, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to look at those contracts. And I'm going to look at the contracts to see, to make sure that they're in compliance with these regulations. So contracts are going to be number one. The second thing I would do is go to the provider, the prescriber, and see what non-written relationships do you have with a pharmaceutical manufacturer or agent. So you may not have a written contract, but you may have some other relationship that needs to be scrutinized in light of these new rules.
Okay, so I'm surveying and I'm sensing I have a problem. What do I do kind of on a global perspective to get my whole system, because realize there's a million different departments with a million different pharmaceutical people coming, cardiology, this, that. How do I get the message out?
Right. So the first thing is, and this is the tough part, because prescribers are very busy people. So they need to be educated. The first thing is they need to know that this law is out there and that it exists. Best way, I think, to educate is in a quick and concise way, so that you can, keep the attention of the person that's being educated, i.e. the prescribers. So education, I think, is key, because probably most doctors in New Jersey don't even know that this is a new thing. It's 2 months old, and they're going to be quite shocked when they hear it.
Okay, and is there, given that you're rolling out compliance plans, is there like a political aspect to this? In other words, should you go to administration and get them to realize that there's been a real change here, and so that when the doctors start flipping out, there's at least the CEO, COO know what's going on?
I think that's always a good idea. It's always a good idea to start from the top and let it go down from the top.
Okay. All right. Next question. By the way, I can assure you that we will not get to everyone's questions. Okay. All right. Somebody wrote, given that it will be the BME most likely enforcing, has there been any commentary from the BME on how the regs will be handled? Julia?
The BME has not issued any type of public notice or any type of formal, response on the regulations. However, because of the vast notice and comment period, the BME is aware, and they had the chance also to provide any kind of public comment or modifications or, changes to the rules. So, at this point, there isn't anything to indicate that the BME does not intend to follow these regulations.
Okay. Thank you. Lourdes, somebody answered. By the way, I hope everyone out there in Toyland, and I realize that people are not dropping off, so I appreciate it. Realize that answering this in real time is kind of difficult because these are just released. So, Lourdes, somebody asked, will these regs have any impact on drug rebate or discount agreements?
Okay, so they should not have any effect. Drug rebates and drug discounts are given hopefully, I should say, in accordance with the discount safe harbor to the anti-kickback statute. So, earlier on, I talked about the anti-kickback statute, which says that you cannot give or receive anything of value in exchange for a referral of business paid for by Medicare, Medicaid, or any other federally funded program. That prohibition, and that's a criminal statute, is so broad that the government has numerous safe harbors to it. And one of the safe harbors is for discounts and rebates. If your discount or rebate arrangement falls squarely within what the government tells you you need to do under that safe harbor, then you should be immune from prosecution. So that's a long way of saying that if you're in compliance with the anti-kickback safe harbor, it should not have an effect with these new regulations.
Okay, great. So, Julia, a lot of people are asking similar questions, and let's set it up as a hypothetical. Dr. Bluestein had a contract. We'll take it in two steps. He had a contract that was signed last year, and I get paid $12,000. How does that relate to the $10,000 limit?
You're fine. Any contracts entered into or before January 15th, 2018 are exempt from the regulation. So the day before the regulation, as long as you have that signed contract, you are not subject to the $10,000 cap and all of the brand new requirements in the written agreement.
So that would be, let's say the day before I was smart enough or psychic enough to enter into a 5-year agreement. So it's taking me well beyond. Am I still protected by the $10,000?
I think that's a risk. Again, the regulations exempt contracts that are entered into before January 15th, 2018. I don't know if a 5-year agreement would, if they would accept that. You're putting yourself at risk.
Okay, let me stay with you because we're talking about the $10,000 cap, okay? Somebody's asking, so if I entered into a contract, I was getting compensation, but it's for what I do in Connecticut. Does that apply towards this?
Yes, that goes towards your $10,000 cap, even though you rendered the services outside of New Jersey. You hold a New Jersey license.
And I think that's a really important point that needs to be underscored because a lot of prescribers in New Jersey will also go to New York, will also go to Pennsylvania. So if you're practicing in New Jersey and you're going to Pennsylvania or New York or wherever else, this $10,000 cap still applies.
Yeah, and it's your responsibility as a New Jersey license holder to keep track of that. So if you get, $8,000 from this one pharmaceutical manufacturer and then somebody else wants to offer you $3,000 for a different type of speaking engagement, you're going to have a problem because that'll make you at $11,000 and put you over the cap. And it's calendar year.
So, meaning that, again,
So we should have big flashing lights next to this one.
Right, right. So that means, again, I'm worried about the compliance officer we've just ruined their day on a snowy day. When they go and interview people, they need to not just, so if somebody says, oh, you mean in New Jersey? The answer should be, no, I mean anywhere.
Right.
Right, okay.
Exactly.
I'm going to ask this question. We'll keep picking on Julia. It looks like somebody, okay, we're getting a lot of questions. Okay, here we go. I'm a key opinion leader and I receive compensation from several pharmaceutical manufacturers that exceed the $10,000 cap. However, I am a key opinion leader. I do not prescribe medications. Am I exempt? Could you explain, maybe for all the people out there, Julia, go to you for the pharmaceutical stuff, what is a key opinion leader and am I exempt?
Yeah, so I think what this question is trying to ask is, they are, known in this field. The key opinion leader, pharmaceutical manufacturers will hire somebody for their expertise. However, it looks like this person still has a license and they prescribe medications, although it is not often. So the answer to that is you are not exempt. It doesn't matter if you prescribe 1 script a year for your mother or if you prescribe, thousands of scripts for your private practice patient. Even if you're a key opinion leader and you receive compensation for your expertise, as long as you hold an active or retired medical license in the state of New Jersey, you are subject to the $10,000 cap.
Okay, good. The next question, I think, was put to us by a pharmaceutical distributor, right? Because they're saying, look, the pharmaceutical distributor is responsible for ensuring that the medications get to where they're going. They do not manufacture it, they don't develop it, they don't prescribe it. They're not involved in the way others are. So shouldn't they be exempt? Are they exempt?
No, and the Attorney General responded to a comment on this point as well. The Attorney General declined to add an exemption for distributors from the regulation.
Okay, good. All right, next question, an out-of-state question. And by the way, we reserve the right to say we need to think about it, right? If a physician primarily practices in Maryland, okay, but holds a New Jersey license as well, is there a mechanism by which they can forfeit their New Jersey license to avoid these regs? Well,
they can't even, I think the answer is no, unless the DME will issue some kind of public notice or response for an exception. Even in New Jersey, you can have a retired license, but that would still be problematic because a retired active license in the state of New Jersey still permits you to prescribe prescriptions in, certain circumstances.
But let me do a follow-up question for you, Julia. If I'm a Maryland doctor and I have a license in New Jersey, but I don't really practice in New Jersey, can I voluntarily, surrender my license, for lack of a better word, in New Jersey and only be licensed in Maryland, and then this would not apply to me?
Correct, but you're giving up your New Jersey medical license.
Right, exactly. So there's no way around it while you have a New Jersey medical license. If you have a New Jersey medical license, and this is going to be an issue also for a lot of New York doctors and other state doctors, Pennsylvania doctors that also maintain a New Jersey license.
It's a great point. And what Lourdes and I have seen a lot is that, let's say 99% or 100% of your activity is in New York, but you happen to have the New Jersey license. They can come after your New Jersey license, and if they come after your New Jersey license and they have a finding against you, that could impact your New York license. So it may be...
Or every other state.
Or every other state.
Every other state license, because they notify, when you get in trouble with a licensing board, that licensing board, I'm sorry that I interrupted you, Andrew, but that licensing board will send out to all of the other states where you're licensed, whatever it is that happened in that particular state. We see it every single day.
Right. So the only way, I'm asking the both of you this, the only way to truly protect yourself, if you don't care about New Jersey, is to give up your license entirely.
Give up your New Jersey license.
Right. And so if you have no license in New Jersey, these regs can't go to you. All right, last question. I'm sorry we didn't get to these, but like I said, you have all of our contact information, and feel free to reach out to us, and we will reach out to you as well. As a DME supplier, while it doesn't appear the reg specifically addresses DME, okay, would you agree we should be adhering to the requirements as a good practice as we have sales reps visiting providers in the field?
Okay, so as a DME provider, I think that you should be adhering to the AdvaMed code and also to the pharma guidelines. It doesn't apply to DME providers specifically. Does that mean it's not going to apply somewhere down the road? Absolutely not. So if you're going to get yourself in line with these regs, it's not a bad idea, but it does not apply to you yet.
Right. Okay, so thank you, everybody. This was, I think, a very useful session, but you'll let us know in your feedback. And again, Garfunkel Wild is always here for any other follow-ups that you need. So have a great day, and thank you to the HFMA.